Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy for Zimperium, and we'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. One of the things that we're very excited about is not only the great capabilities that machine learning can bring in security across the board, but particularly in mobile threat defense. We're also equally excited to actually talk about how it actually gets done to separate reality, the hype from the reality, because there's a lot of people that talk about it. It's a totally different ballgame to actually deliver on it. So it should be about a 30-minute session, like we've been trying to keep it to. And please use the Q&A section to send any information, any questions you've got to us, and then we'll get to those at the tail end. Naturally, we will be putting up a recorded version of this, and also can provide slides to folks that are interested in getting those slides. We are going to be led today by the Chief Technology Officer of Zimperium, John Michelson. And so, John, I will now hand it over to you. Thank you very much for helping step us through it.
Thank you, JT, especially for telling me, remember, you only got 30 minutes, buddy, so get through it quick.
It was a subtle hint.
It wasn't subtle. I got it. I get it. JT happens to know, as this is probably my 250th webinar I've done, I can tend to be a little long-winded. So JT reminds me to be 30 minutes. Let's get going. I think it would be only fair to start with, why does something like machine learning even need to be applied to mobile threat defense? And why do we even need mobile threat defense for that matter? So let's just hit 4 quick bullets here. Apple and Google released a record number of security patches last year. That number of security patches last year is going to be dwarfed by the number they released this year. No, this is not news, right? These platforms need to be hardened and secured, and there are plenty of vulnerabilities. In fact, number 2 there, right? 2/3 of all mobiles are running an operating system with known vulnerabilities. This is not just an Android thing, which is generally known that Android updates are slower. It's become quite common in iOS because of the first bullet, in fact, because there are so many updates coming. 14% of all devices have experienced a man-in-the-middle attack. This is a network-type attack, and this is from our own threat data. So when you think about it, over the course of a year, 14% have gotten one specific type of threat. So there's a significant amount of activity in mobile threat. And then finally, by next year, 1/3 of all malware that hackers produce will target mobiles. So think about it. 1 in every 3 pieces of malware that is produced next year will be targeted at a mobile device. You spend 3/3 of your effort on desktop malware detection, but 1/3 of the malware produced will be targeting mobiles. So we think we need to be focused on, as an industry, focused on mobile threat defense quite a bit, because user education is not going to do it. I will only spend a second on this. But we currently have a notion, and I get this fairly constantly. What we do to protect our mobile devices is we put management solutions on them, which, by the way, are great products, and we are partnered with those guys, and they're good things to do. You want to make sure your users don't make silly mistakes with their mobile devices, clearly. But essentially, they take that one step further and say, let's just educate our users on proper hygiene, or make sure they patch or do something or other, and we think we'll be safe. And by the way, the number of people saying this is dwindling fast, right? So I'm going to stop. I'm going to just exit the soapbox at some point. But think about it, guys. We're looking here at 2 examples of malicious apps that you can't tell they're malicious apps, and we ourselves would have succumbed to this. There's a fake BBC News app on the right-hand side of this slide, and you can't tell which is the fake and which is the real one. And yet the fake one will exploit your device. You can't tell on the left-hand side that advanced photo editor isn't just some cute little girl you get to put little fancy, put a little crown on and put doggy ears on. You've got an actually malicious app that's, while you're doing that with your kids' photos, it's infecting your device and doing all kinds of nasty stuff. So user education is going to solve for this. We've got to not just think of this as a user issue. We've got to put detection technology on the mobile device to protect it, even when our user does silly things or does increases the vulnerability of the device. So we need to take sophisticated technology to solve this problem. That's why we've ended up being so focused on machine learning capabilities. So let's jump into that. Machine learning, let's define it. Machine learning is a current application of AI, artificial intelligence, based around the idea that we should really just be able to give machines access to data and let them learn for themselves. This is a quote from Forbes. And by the way, a quote that I pulled from a white paper we produced, which I would highly recommend anyone who wants to read further on this topic, referenced in our blog, and you can download the white paper from our website. So there's plenty of functional definitions of machine learning. Essentially, what this is saying is the machine is given us a large collection of data. That data gives software the ability to infer learning from that software, from that data, in such a way that it can make decisions in the future. Now, we apply machine learning in a very specific way. We use classification. And this is a space, right? This is an academic and now significant amount of technology space inside of machine learning, inside of artificial intelligence. It's essentially a 4-step process. And you're going to see me walk through this process in 2 different areas that we apply machine learning. But I want to give it to you at the meta level right now. We build an engine. We have built an engine. We call it Z9, that can do sophisticated analysis of attributes when given massive amounts of data to categorize or classify, both words pretty much the same, that data. What we mean by that is you give it terabytes of information. And this is step 2. You give it terabytes worth of information and you tell it these samples of data match a category we want you to learn how to detect. And these samples don't. So essentially you're saying, let's be cardiologists with an EKG. Here is a series of EKG readouts of healthy hearts. Here is a bunch of EKG readouts with a certain heart condition represented in the data. Here's a certain set of EKG results with a different heart condition represented in the results. Now, you cardiologists figure out the difference between the good hearts, the hearts with the one bad condition, and the hearts with the different bad condition. That's essentially what machine learning classifiers do. They take samples of something that we want to categorize in the future, and we tell it, this is one of these, this is one of these, this is one of these, this is malware, right? This is malware, this is malware, this is malware. And then we give it a bunch of good apps. This is a good app, this is a good app, this is a good app. And then step 3, it learns how to determine those that are in or out of the category, and it outputs a model that it can actually use to make that decision at runtime in the future. So then step 4, when given a new sample in the wild, now we're talking about on your mobile device. When given a new sample, here's a new app, here's a new condition of the device, whatever it is. The model will then classify that sample or that state of the device based on its learning in steps 1, 2, and 3. So essentially that's how classification works. You train in steps 1 and 2. It learns in step 3. You deploy into the wild in step 4, and then it's making decisions. And these decisions are considered non-deterministic in that it produces a classification with a confidence factor, often not 100%. And by the way, often is an understatement. It's almost never 100%. Even if you give it an exact same sample of what you trained it on, it may not actually know with 100% certainty that sample is in fact malicious or good. It will have a confidence factor based on the attributes that it determined, help it determine whether or not the sample is malicious or not. So it's not if then else logic. That's the most difficult thing for technical people to kind of get their head around with machine learning. It's a probability math, it's statistics, it's non-deterministic. So as contrast to that, what is machine learning defined per marketing departments? Machine learning is whatever we do in our product that allows us to claim we're machine learning. and oh my goodness, early on we used to literally pitch Zimperium as a machine learning based product for blah, blah, blah. And we've stopped doing that mostly because everyone else pitches themselves a machine learning based product to do whatever, regardless of what the product does. Because what the marketing department did was basically said, for example, we store information for later retrieval. Then we say the machine learned, right? The machine learned, here is the signature sitting in a cloud of an app that we know is malicious. The machine learned that sample is malicious, therefore we have machine learning, don't we? It's fantastic, right? You gotta love the guys in marketing because they help us all buy stuff and see what we want, and sometimes they confuse in the process. Machine learning is, big M, big L machine learning, or ML, is a science space. It's an area of scientific study. Our technology is based on C5 and based on UC Irvine sample sets and based on big R, and a whole collection of algorithms and thinking and science, not a relational database, which is what my example here at the bottom of this slide is. Right? A relational database, or any database for that matter, would actually honor the definition of machine learning, given we store information for later retrieval, so the machine learned that data, right? That's not going to work. In fact, that's not a non-deterministic thing. That's a very deterministic thing, my example there. So machine learning per the market is now a very watered down term. We're talking about the science, the classical science of machine learning. And we don't just use machine learning. The other aspect that I think is worth mentioning is machine learning is actually useful in only specific areas. There are other areas within our space and others that machine learning is inappropriate for, or at least not as effective. There are plenty of ways that we do detection that are very deterministic in nature. Pardon me, very if-then-else type. For example, when we check to see if a website or if a hacker is trying to remove the SSL from a secured connection, that is a deterministic detection that we do in order to do that. We don't need machine learning and training and all of this big data science and all that stuff to do that type of detection. That's very if-then-else type logic. We do a lot in risk analysis, and I'll go quickly through the rest of this, but we do a lot in risk analysis. That's crowdsourced data that comes from lots of various repositories. We do tons of compute-intensive risk work to analyze apps. We use a whole collection of servers in the cloud in order to do that. And there is some machine learning, by the way, in some of those processes. But overall, it's a large data processing effort, a very traditional data processing effort in most cases. Some detections, though, are only or best possible with on-device machine learning-based approaches. There are some things that we need to do, that our product has to sign up to do in order to solve for the whole mobile threat defense space, that only can be done through machine learning techniques. 3 examples: zero-day malicious app detection. In other words, a malicious app that is as yet not in anybody's database, right? It's not in the cloud-based machine learning version of malware detection, which is a bunch of samples. Second, live detonation of an exploit, the most dangerous thing that can happen, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then third, some of our network attack detections also need to be done with machine learning because they can't be done deterministically. Some can, some cannot. I've underlined these 2, zero-day malicious apps and live detonation of an exploit, because I'm going to drill down on how we actually do machine learning to make detections for both of those. And I'm going to talk about why we think that's so important and why we're so proud of it. So let's talk first about apps. The problem with the little m, little l machine learning version of cloud-based detection of malicious apps is it's completely ineffective. It just doesn't work. And why do I say that? Well, sorry, read my long title here. Malicious app identification is hopelessly behind malicious app production. There are more malicious apps being produced every day than there are researchers able to actually identify if an app is malicious or not. There are too many bad guys, not enough good guys, and so we go literally months, sometimes years, with not detecting that an app, or in some cases, if you're reading the slide, hundreds or even 1,000+ apps have been malicious for months, already infected millions of devices, in a couple of cases, tens of millions of devices, and yet they go undetected, even when there are so-called mobile threat defense products that have this machine learning-based cloud detection thing onto them. That's why, read the bottom of my slide, others say, update to the newest version to protect yourself going forward, meaning you weren't protected yet, right? We always say you were always protected. You were already protected, I should say. You were already protected. Now, how do we do this? How can they all have to update their software, update their cloud, add new signatures, do whatever, and we say you were already protected? How does that work? That's what we've been able to accomplish with machine learning. So let's drill into that. Here is the same process I described in that 4 bulleted numbers earlier. This is what it looks like more graphically. Start in the middle of the slide with me. In our lab, not on the device, in the wild, on your phones, but in our lab, we install thousands of safe apps and thousands of malicious apps. Those apps, the literal binary, the APK, the IPA, the binary of the app itself is read into our data repository. Methods, class names, features, strings, permissions, developer information, everything that is embodied inside that application binary. But by the way, that is the actual thing you download from the Google Play or Apple App Store. That's what I mean by the application's binary. That thing embodies all of the awareness that our engine needs to learn if that app is going to try to go rogue on you or is a relatively safe app. That data, when we give it thousands of examples of bad apps and thousands of examples of good apps, it then goes through a series of sophisticated modeling, mostly statistical style modeling, and a whole bunch of other processes that we've invented and we've come up with we've been doing this for years and years. Founded in 2011. We've been working on this for literally 5-6 years before we even delivered on iOS and all that. So we've been doing this a long time. There's a significant amount of technology that is deployed in order to refine these models and make them accurate. And yes, there's a false positive problem in the general use of ML, and there's not in our use because we've learned how to refine these models very well. What comes out of this process is a classifier that plugs into our engine, Z9, so that when an app is installed on a mobile device, whether it's installed through our product Zips or our product Z app, and we're not going to get into those today, but those are the two ways you actually consume our stuff. Our engine Z9 is able to determine at runtime if an app that just landed on the device is in fact safe or it's a bad guy. Even if, this is important, even if that app was not in our training set. If that app had not even been written yet. We trained on last Friday, we deployed on Monday of this week, and here on Wednesday, a developer installed an app for the first time on a device that's running our technology. We would detect it. We have a high degree of confidence. We would detect that app is malicious if in fact it is. So this is how that process actually works. Here's a screenshot or two of how we train this particular piece, Z9 from Malicious Apps. We've got incredibly high effectiveness out of this approach. You know, the signature-based approach is good at identifying when you know it's malicious, you have a deterministic, is it in our database? Yes, then deterministically, with 100% confidence, yes, that app is malicious. And that's great, right? The problem is our database is never going to be big enough because we don't know all the apps. 5,000 new apps or updated apps are going into Google Play today. 5,000. None of those are in our database, right? We don't have a database, but if we had, none of those 5,000 are on our database. 100 of them, let's say arguably, 100 of them are malicious. They're clearly not there. So we're 100% right with what we already know is bad, but we're 100% wrong with what we don't know is bad. Our solution is not like that. We detect 99.2% with no database, right? So we're a highly effective. We've detected every bank bot sample because that was one of the things our customers asked us to do, right? Get every known bank bot sample, run it through the system, not ones that we trained on, ones that we didn't train on. Make sure every bank bot sample actually checks out, and sure enough it did. There's an Android version of Pegasus, which is a well-known iOS exploit. It's also there's also a version of the same kind of thing on Android. Did the same thing with Pegasus samples, and in fact, many Pegasus samples on Android undetected by any other system except ours, etc. So this is actually happening, right? Let me jump to the bottom. Behavior classifiers. All of our customers want to know, is it malicious? Yes, but what I want to know is what about it is malicious? Is it a keylogger? Like it literally captures all the things I type on screen and sends it to a command and control server. Does it capture screenshots every few seconds and send those? We're in the process of training our solution to identify these. And if I opened the mic up and said, what is the challenge for us doing that? Hopefully someone would say, you have to have a bunch of samples. That's what this requires. We need thousands of bad guy keyloggers in order to properly train our system to accurately identify keyloggers. If we only have a few of them, it may misrepresent. Let's say, just as a silly example, all of our keyloggers happen to have an app that starts with the letter A. Our machine learning may actually think if an app starts with the letter A, it must be a keylogger because every keylogger started with the letter A. Now, it wouldn't do that. That wouldn't actually happen. The system wouldn't actually do that. But conceptually, it could misunderstand causality, right? That's why you have to have enormous amounts of samples, both on the good and the bad side, in order to properly train. So when we get enough keyloggers, when we get enough screen grabbers, when we get enough, name all of these bad things that these apps can do, when we get enough of these, we'll be able to classify even down to that level, and we're in the process of doing that. Hopefully we will have it in months, if not a couple of quarters. It just takes a long time to get all the right data. So hopefully you've got a sense around you now of what that's like. Now, showing a video in a webinar is sometimes a bad thing, but I want to make sure, I'm going to pause a couple of times to make sure we get a good idea here. So one of our guys produced a piece of malware, went to VirusTotal, and made sure that that sample is not identified as bad in any of the backend systems that VirusTotal maintains. And by the way, a lot of people get shocked here and say, oh my gosh, it's a new piece of malware. Guys, this happens 100,000 times a day. It's an exaggeration. It could happen 100,000 times a day. I could write a script and run that script in a loop to do it 100,000 times a day, and we could do this. We do this all the time. Making samples that no deterministic system can trigger on, can detect on, is brain dead simple. I could show everyone on this webinar how to do it, and you would effectively be good at doing it. You could bypass deterministic malicious app detection so easily, it's not even funny. Our guys do it all the time. Here's just an example of doing it, and that's not even the point of this demo. The point of the demo wasn't to show you that that's easy to do. That is easy to do. Here's what was the point of this demo. We put our engine on this Android in the middle. We disabled the network, completely disabled network connectivity on this device. We then side-loaded that malicious app, the app that we proved no one detected as malicious, right? And watch what this thing does. Let me catch here. Here it goes. On the screen on your right-hand side, we're about to do an install of that malicious app that we just said no one thought was malicious. And instantly, our Z9 trained to determine, not from the name of the app or the signature of the app or the developer of the app, but by reading the binary on device, we were able to identify that app as malicious, immediately trigger a detection, and tell the user they need to remove this app because it's malicious. Isn't that fantastic? I can hear the crowd. I can hear the clapping. I can just hear it. Ooh, pardon me. Wrong button. Here we go. So now let's transition. That was malicious app identification and what we do in order to solve for that problem. Let's quickly move to, is malicious app protection enough? The answer to that is no. If your solution only identifies malicious apps, you're not solving enough of mobile threat defense. Here's just a simple example. Focus with me on the middle bar here. Device threat breakdown, right? This data shows, this comes right out of our own global threat intelligence. Our data shows that only 2.2% of the devices we protect get hit with malicious apps. Now, obviously, that's a significant enough number. You want to protect from that, clearly. But that's clearly not the significant number. Device level and network level threats actually hit us much more often than malicious apps hit us. Let that sink in. Network threats and device level threats hit us much more often than malicious apps do. Why is that? Well, the real reason is because you can hit a mobile device with a freaking unbelievable number of threat types. Apps is just one of a dozen plus ways, dozen's not the right number, that you can attack a mobile device. Think about how many radios are on this thing. Think about the USB connection. Every site you go to through the browser, malicious content in the browser can do it. In fact, by the way, that was Pegasus. And the one that we disclosed years ago that still shakes everybody's stage fright was picture files and graphics files, media files that can explode on a device and hack it. Those were not malicious apps installed from a Play Store. Those were content delivered in a browser or in a picture window. Any number of ways that you can send content to this device, and there are many, you can attack it that way. So malicious apps is only one of several ways. And in fact, it's not even the worst one. It's not. Malicious apps are not the worst one from a targeted attack perspective. From a consumer perspective, it actually might be, by the way, from a consumer perspective. But from an enterprise, persistent threat, targeted attack perspective, we argue, and we would be effectively arguing, it clearly is not. Device level attacks are the objective for a targeted attack. What a bad guy's trying to do, who's trying to infiltrate your organization, is take complete control of a device. He or she is not going to do that by producing a malicious app, installing it in Play stores, and hoping people download it. Not going to happen. They're going to use device-level compromise, and they're going to deliver that over a network threat or over on one of the other radios through a browser-based phishing attack, etc. So I've shown you how we use machine learning for malicious app identification. I now need to show you how we use machine learning for live exploit detection. How do we do that? Well, we don't read the application binary. There is no application binary, right? We're not reading the binary. What are we reading then? We're reading the statistics, the monitoring statistics that come off the device. So while our app sits in a sandbox, just like any other good app in user space, and malicious processes, or processes that weren't malicious but have been weaponized by a bad guy, they sit in an app sandbox, just like we do. Both of us affect the kernel. They affect the networking and the scheduler, memory, device drivers, all this stuff, process, all that stuff. We are able to determine the state of the device through the monitoring statistics and monitor the state transitions of the mobile device to see if a state transition it goes through is indicative of a threat. I'll say that one more time, super fast, just to make sure I'm clear. All of these monitoring statistics are like nerve endings of a body, right? What we do is we train our software to read all those monitoring statistics to see if those monitoring statistics can tell us whether the device is being attacked or whether the device is doing normal stuff. Think of it that way. So again, we're in the same type of loop as we were in malicious app identification, only this time we're not installing apps, we're delivering exploits. We're using the device normally, and telling our engine, this is all normal, all this is cool, this is fine. And then we hit it with an exploit, and we say, that's an exploit. And we do this over and over and over again. And so thousands of stats, real time, over many hours of time produced, generates literally terabytes of monitoring data, by the way, that then we categorize. We say, these points were when we exploited the device. These points were when we used the device normally, no exploit. We build a classifier of when that model determines one of these monitoring state statistics transitions, not just one, but a whole series of them. It requires a number of them all at the same time. When essentially the device goes from a state of normal behavior to a state of under attack, suddenly it knows from the learning it did, that's indicative of a threat, it triggers a detection, and we know that the device is being compromised. That's how we do live detonation of exploit detection. So what have we effectively done? We've effectively built a nervous system for a mobile device. That's what we've done. The nerve endings are already there. These monitoring stats, there's thousands of them already, right? There's thousands of nerve endings on your mobile device. Memory, kernel, battery, power, CPU, all of that. It's all there. What we've done is we've taught software how to read those stats and essentially feel the difference between a we're not under attack category or classification versus a we are under an attack type of classification. And think about it, guys. If someone walked up behind us and touched us gently on the back, those nerve endings would fire certain along the nerve endings into our brain and tell us those nerves would tell us certain data, and our brain would determine not under attack. This is someone being nice to me. That same set of nerve endings, that same brain have been trained that it doesn't matter if you see even what's behind you. If something hits you from behind, it hits you with a certain velocity, hits you in a certain way or with a certain sharpness or any number of things, your nerve endings will deliver data into your brain, and your brain will make the determination, this is not friend, this is foe. And you don't have to know what it looks like. You don't have to have its signature. You don't have to have already been told what it is. You don't have to be anything. Your nervous system is sophisticated enough to know when those nerve endings fire in these certain types of ways, that's indicative of a threat to me. That's exactly what live detonation machine learning does on a mobile device for Z9. That's what we've done. So with that now deployed in the wild, we're about to make a really bold claim. We have detected every kernel exploit that's ever been found in the wild, whether it was on Android or on iOS, without an update. Not we went and updated our signatures, not we went back and retrained. I'm saying the day before any of this stuff was actually known and disclosed, if it was detonated on our device with Z9 on it, it triggered a detection. It didn't have to know that's a weapon against me. It could feel, pardon me for using the analogy, feel software and machines feel. We'll see. They're getting there, right? But we'll pardon my analogy. But the device can feel the difference between a normal app, between normal browser activity, between normal content coming across USB, between normal content coming across a Bluetooth connection, etc., and malicious content trying to attack the device. That is why we've been able to detect every exploit that has ever been disclosed in the wild, regardless of how it was delivered. Clearly through apps, clearly. We would detect it that way. But in every other way as well, even disconnected from the network, just like my example with the malicious app identification. So that's why we're so proud of our machine learning approach. That's why we took a machine learning approach, because even though there are many types of detections we need to make, some detections to actually protect from the targeted persistent threat that enterprises, governments, etc., really come under, we've got to be able to detect the zero-day app and, of course, the zero-day exploit, regardless of how it's delivered. Machine learning approaches, highly refined by us over years, have given us the ability to do that. We're the only ones in our market that can do it. So with that, I am through with the material. I'm doing a time check that I'm only 2 minutes late, and I'm sure between JT's rambling at the beginning, that was 2 minutes. So I stuck to 30, JT. I'm going to claim victory. I stuck to 30.
Oh, you know what? I'm claiming victory. I mean, the over-under, I lost $5, but I'll take it. So John, that was awesome. And we've already started to get a few questions coming in. I will remind everybody that to drop your questions in the Q&A box. So why don't we just start off with some of the ones that already came in. This one came in right before your last slide, so I'm pretty sure you've already covered it, but I'll ask you to see if there's any additional commentary. How do you know that you can detect a new exploit without having seen that exploit yet?
Yeah. And this is good. This is good because, in fact, we can't with 100% certainty, right? Let's be intellectually honest. I'll go back a slide. We are really proud of the fact that we've detected every exploit without update, but that is not 100% confidence that we will always do that. Let's be intellectually honest. We have to continuously train, but our confidence is in the fact that we have so far, our confidence is high that we will going forward. And the good news is hackers have to do something aggressive to actually exploit. They have to do something aggressive. I hate the analogy, but it works. No one can beat you up without affecting your nerve endings in a certain way. Your body is going to feel it. You are going to feel it if someone attacks you, right? You're going to feel it. It doesn't matter if it's a brand new weapon you've never seen before, you're going to feel it. And that's why we're so confident. But let's be honest. We have to realize this is a non-deterministic approach. So far, we have been 100%. We will always be diligent about looking into the future. So our confidence is very, very high. It clearly is higher than any other approach from anyone else in our market. But it's not 100%. It's near 100%. No,
that's a great question. And here's a question I think is related to your analogy about, like I said, getting beaten up or something. There's various different ways, shapes, and forms that can occur, but your nerve endings are always going to respond, right? And so the question is, what if someone makes an exploit that does not affect the statistics at all?
Okay, yes. This is another good one. And this is a little bit harder to grasp my response, but let me take a shot at it. So if something is doing something bad on your device, but doesn't actually attack the device, it's not actually an exploit. It's more of a data exfiltration problem. So for example, if you have an app that is taking your calendar, your email, your pictures, your passwords, your everything from your phone and sending them to a third-party site, right? But it didn't exploit the device to do it. The user gave it permission. The user gave it permission to do all that stuff. So that we have a different type of solution for. That's app analysis. If the user gave access to those data and then the data leaves the device, that's not exploit. That's just back to our users are giving permissions, essentially what Gartner calls a leaky app, or a permissions abuser, or an aggressive permissions accessing app. We want to make sure you can see the difference, right? I mean, we all know that there are certain social media apps that are sort of aggressively using their permissions. They're not malicious. The user gave that access. They're doing what is considered normal behavior, but they're still doing things that we don't want we don't want to be unaware of the fact that they're doing this. So there's two sides to app identification about malicious or a data leaker. Is it malicious, literally malicious? In other words, it's stealing data and the user did not give it permission. That's what we're talking about in this webinar. Another type of app you have to protect from is the app that asks the user for permission and then abuses that permission. And maybe that user shouldn't have even given permission because it's not corporate policy to let third-party apps have access to corporate calendars, corporate email, corporate contacts, etc. And yet the user did that unbeknownst to them or silly user or whatever, right? So we have malicious and we have a permissions abuser. What you just described, if it didn't do anything to attack you, but it still does bad things, it's not an exploit, it's not malicious, it's a permissions abuser. I hope that distinction came out in all that rambling.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it did. So we have a couple more questions. This one is a different one. It's kind of going off on a different tangent, and it came in pretty early. And it said, do you think remote access can bypass the end-to-end encryption in some major application like WhatsApp?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So okay, here's a quick philosophy or architecture to think about this. A mobile device and an app on a mobile device can do two things, but cannot do the third with regard to encryption. It can encrypt data in motion, right? That can be defeated, by the way, but it can encrypt data in motion. It can also encrypt data that is stored, data at rest. So data in motion and data at rest can be encrypted. A hacker compromised your device can grab the same exact keys that are used to encrypt and decrypt that data and decrypt that data for him or herself. So that data is in play even before we talk about the third type of data. That data is vulnerable and in the wind if the device is compromised. But typically people think they're safe as long as they encrypt data in motion and data at rest. The third part in this architecture of where data resides is live data, data in memory, data on screen, data being typed, right? That data is necessarily unencrypted. When it's sitting on the screen, it's not encrypted, is it, folks? If it was encrypted, you couldn't read it. When you type it, it's clearly not encrypted. And when it's sitting in memory, but when it's been read from encrypted storage into memory in order to display to you or process or do whatever it needs to do, it is stored in memory decrypted. So all three aspects of data are available to the hacker if they compromise, and live data is available without any kind of reconnaissance at all. They have access to that unencrypted data even without trying to find your key on the disk. And they'll be able to find it if they work at it and decrypt even the data in motion and data at rest. But unfortunately, there's nothing an app can do. And I'm saying this knowing that I have some app partners that work really hard to do everything they can. Still the statement holds. There is nothing an app can do if the OS, operating system, if the OS itself is compromised. There is nothing the app can do to protect itself except delete the data, close the network connections, wipe its memory. That's defend itself, essentially, is my point there. All it can do is detect that compromise occurred and defend itself by removing the data that can be decrypted. That's all it really can do.
Perfect. So last question should be a reasonably quick one. Thanks again, John, and thank you everybody else for attending this session. Like I said before, we'll make sure that the recording is up and we can provide slides to folks. This is I think, a pretty smart question. Does this approach take more mobile battery than your competitors?
Okay. So
and actually, I'm just going to add one to it,
sure.
Which is because we always get the 1-2 punch. One is the battery, and then 2 is data usage. Reply to both at the same time.
Yeah, sure. So the good news here is no, not at all, because since our model is running on device, the machine learning heavy lifting has already been done in our lab. The result of machine learning is what's running on the device. That is actually a very low, lightweight, just make system calls, collects data that's already in memory, doesn't need to do a whole lot of, it's not a significant CPU or CPU, therefore battery effort. And because we do detection on device, we're not chatty on the network at all. We're not constantly sending data to some cloud service to check to see if things are okay. We're checking right on the device with statistics we collect right on the device, right? So it's actually very lightweight compared to competitors, because those competitors are constantly streaming data. Some of them have full-time VPNs. Some of them are just constantly sending data to their cloud services. And that's actually much heavier. It's much more of a battery and data drain to be opening a network connection and sending data and getting data back and then processing results than it is to just read system monitoring stats that are already in the kernel, already available to all the apps, and just doing math on them. And we're literally just doing math on them, right? That's essentially all we're doing. So it's actually very lightweight. But that is a great question, because it sounds like we're doing something pretty sophisticated. By the time we get done, we're actually doing something fairly simple, in fact. It's a simple output to a very complex problem we solve in the lab.
That is perfect. Well, John, thank you very much. And thank you for being spot on time-wise, and then dealing with the questions and providing some great insights. Thank you very much for your time. And folks, thank you very much for your time. And we hope that this has been a valuable time for you all, and hope you have a great day.
Bye, everyone.